Hello, my friends. God bless you. Welcome back to Traveler of the Wood. You haven't seen me in a while because I have been in Arkansas celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday with family. I was down there for about 3 weeks, and Jennifer flew down and was with me for the final week, and we drove back yesterday up here to Missouri. So we're back in Missouri. Driving in, I wasn't planning on there still being snow on the ground from Missouri's last snow, but there was plenty to be seen. So that was a little bit interesting. But yeah, we had a great time in Arkansas. Spent a lot of time with family, like I said, for the holidays. And it was a nice time. I do this almost every time I go to Arkansas. I have all these plans to make videos, and I end up getting busy doing all sorts of things and don't get to make as many as I would like. But this last time, I didn't really get to make any. Jennifer and I did do some hiking while we were out there, and it was so beautiful. And this is the hiking area where I really like to make videos whenever I'm down there, just because it's quiet and big and expansive. Yeah, it was a real nice time. The first day we went hiking, it was very, very nice weather. And the second day we went hiking, it was very cold. So starting to adapt our bodies to the winter. But yeah, it was nice. It was a nice trip. So some things I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks have been getting to where we want to be in our lives. We've been talking very seriously. You've probably heard me mention this in other videos, but we've been looking for property. We've been looking around kind of in the Ozark area of Missouri. We've been looking around Little Rock, Arkansas, some of the more outskirts places, just to find some property. It's been kind of complicated because we want to live close enough to medical care for Jennifer, but we also want to be rural enough that we can have our own little patch of forest and place to grow food and set up a decent homestead. The last time I was down in Arkansas, I went and toured a property that was just the most perfect property I've ever seen. And by the time I got back and started getting all my financial ducks in a row, someone had already bid on the property, and I think they're probably going to get it. So I'm a little bummed about that, but it was one of those properties that was just so perfect for what we needed. You know, we were both kind of bummed that someone snatched it up. But things happen in God's time, so we will be continuing our search. Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about, you know, where we want to be, how we want our lives to look for, you know, essentially the rest of our lives. And we're trying to find a place that will be, you know, where we permanently set up shop, essentially. I really want property big enough to have a center that people can come on pilgrimage to, and just kind of have a little, I guess you could say, spiritual retreat from the world. And all of that is still in the plan. So I'm thinking about all of that as I'm shopping for property. But we talked a lot about what it is that we want and what it is that we need. That conversation kind of stimulated a lot of thoughts, because we've noticed that there are a lot of people that we've talked to recently that want to escape, for lack of a better term. They want to get away. They want to get to a place where they don't have to participate in modernity. And of course, many of us want that. But at the same time, if we completely withdraw from society, our hands are not going to be helping to shape the American story. And maybe in a way they will if we kind of withdraw from society. But, you know, you still need community. That's the biggest thing that we've been talking about. And one of the reasons why we're looking at living kind of near Little Rock, because that's where all of our family and friends are. You know, her family is up here in Missouri. But the rest of our family and friends are in Little Rock, so we're trying, or Central Arkansas, you should say. So we're trying to find a good balance. We stopped in Batesville yesterday, and the day before, actually, on Friday, to visit some of my mom's side of the family. And Batesville's a really interesting town in Arkansas. It's a fairly big town, but it just feels... It's always felt a little bit depressing to me because you can sense that people want to get out of there. Even though it's a fairly big and thriving small town, I should say. It just feels strange being there, but that's beside the point. On our way out, my GPS took me through some crazy backwoods way to eventually get to Pocahontas, Arkansas, where we can get on the 67 and continue up into Missouri. And as we were driving through the backwoods, there's so many little small communities, like farming communities, that you can just tell they've been there forever. Like some of these people, have these very like goblin tier junkyards and ramshackle houses and stuff. Some of these houses have 40 or 50 cars that are like partially buried under the earth and stuff. And it was just really a wild trip driving through some of these weird rural communities. But what we noticed and what we were talking about is that these people still had community. I bet all these people knew all of their neighbors, because there'd be maybe 20 houses or something just in the middle of nowhere. And, the nearest services or hospitals or anything would be, 20, 30 miles from these places. Occasionally you'd see a little volunteer fire station or something. And we appreciated the quaintness of the community, but they just felt... how can you say this? It felt like it was probably a bunch of boomers that lived there and their kids had long since moved away, and these people are aging and they can't really keep up with anything anymore. So it's like the farms are kind of barely functional, and it was just a weird feeling. And I was like, well, there's a bunch of young people that are now wanting this kind of lifestyle. And I guess I'm wondering how that's going to look when people start kind of trying to do some community building out in more rural areas. And of course, that's something we want to do, but, being more on the introverted spectrum of things, we don't really want to be that close to random people. We want the people that we know to all get together and kind of form a community. But as I was doing some online searching, I noticed, of course we have this return to the land movement that's gotten popular due to the controversy of them being an all-white community in Arkansas. I think what they're doing is totally fine. But I also noticed that my YouTube algorithm has been showing me a bunch of different stuff like this. And there is a Catholic version of the return to the land movement, and they're kind of establishing their own, independent Catholic communities. And I know some American Orthodox young people are starting to kind of think in this direction. And I see a lot of people thinking in this direction. So what is this going to mean for the country? In a way, this is kind of an ideological balkanization. And what I mean by that is that these people are essentially withdrawing from the culture at large and creating their own culture. And I am very much in favor of this. And, a lot of this reminds me of some stuff Terrence McKenna used to talk about back in the day about, creating your own culture and everything. Even though his version was a little bit more psychedelically driven, I don't think anyone in the early 90s would have expected that there was going to be a very large-scale conservative swing to this. It's not the hippies that are wanting to go get out and live on the land anymore. It's the new counterculture of more conservative young people that are wanting to have more traditional lives and essentially create, religiously based communities. So yeah, there's tons of thoughts I have on all this, and I'm not going to put them all in this video, but we're at an interesting time, and I want to see, I guess I'm curious to see if the government, for lack of a better term, is going to try to propagandize people away from that as they start to see it becoming more and more popular. Because smaller communities that are very strong and very rooted, especially in religion, but just rooted in more traditional value systems, are way harder to control. And they're way harder to incentivize to do things. The great irony of all of this is that the hippies, who you would imagine would be doing all of this, are the ones flocking to the cities because they want this multicultural life. They want, all of this stuff. And a lot of, I guess you could say, hippies that I grew up with have kind of shifted their aesthetic from the natural hippie organic type of personalities into this cyberpunk kind of thing where they want all of this. They're into transhumanism. They're into immersion with AI and with the machines and everything. And it's just, it's been really weird for me to see that, because some people that I know personally that, 20 years ago would never have ever thought anything about living a life like that are now actively working to make that into their lives. So there's been a shift, is what I'm getting at, a very big shift between people. And when I say young people, I need to start saying middle-aged people, because a lot of millennials are now entering the middle age, and they're realizing that the culture has nothing to offer them anymore, and they're wanting to start anew somewhere. But there's also very much a big anti-work element to all of this. And I don't think it's that there is millennial laziness. I'm sure that there is in some capacity, but I think that people are wanting to work for themselves. They're tired of working for other people. They're tired of just barely scraping by while whatever company they work for, succeeds and makes millions of dollars, or billions in some cases. And people are tired of that. It doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel right. And I personally would much rather get up and toil every day to ensure that I have food to eat, or ensure that, my house is in order, my community is in order. And I think a lot of millennials are in this position. Of course, Gen Z has an interesting thing with all of this, because a lot of Gen Z are very helplessly addicted to the digital control structure. And some of them are fortunate enough to have been immersed in that, been born into it, really, and realize that it's an empty shell and has not much to offer. So a lot of them are also kind of joining some of these movements. And I think that's also great, because younger people are what make these kind of things thrive. And as millennials are getting older, I can just speak for myself. I don't have the same amount of energy that I did when I was 20. When I was 20, I just wanted to conquer the world, but I was too busy smoking weed and taking psychedelics to do anything with that energy. And I do kind of regret that now that I'm a little bit older, because now I have the vision. I see what I want to do, and it's just a lot harder for me to find motivation. It's harder for me to have the stamina and energy to build what I want to build. So it's just kind of an interesting observation. But that said, I'm still very much enraptured with this idea. I do have the drive to see this through. So that's kind of what I'm really focusing on. But at the same time, it's been harder for me to be creative. It's been harder for me to work on music. It's been harder for me to do a lot of things just because my brain space is just so focused on you need to find your permanent place, your permanent residence. And, I like I like being the wandering wizard type, but at the same time, I want to build my castle, essentially. So it's just some random thoughts on all of this stuff. Yeah, so coming up soon, I would like to make a video about AI, a more in-depth video on AI. I know I've mentioned it a couple times already, but there's a great conversation with Jonathan Pageau, John Vervaeke, and Paul Vanderklay regarding AI, and I want to show some clips from that because I really think that's the most important AI conversation that's on the internet right now. And it's already been released a while, and I meant to make a video on it when it first released so it'd be fresh, but it's been around a little while, so a lot of people have seen it. But if you haven't, I highly recommend it. And yeah, I'm going to make a video about that very soon. I am probably going to be up here in Missouri through Christmas, so I'm going to try to focus on getting some videos out. Yeah, a lot of my focus really has been on this channel and trying to talk about some of these things, open up some of these conversations. So as I always say, I really appreciate all of you who are watching. It really means a lot to me that you're here. More videos coming down the pipeline. So God bless you all. I hope you all have a beautiful and wonderful day today, and I'll see you at the next video.